The star falls. Its light swallowed by the earth's caress. Human hand turns and stone gates grind.
Well, happy Friday evening, everyone. This is the Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles. I'm Robert Clark, your host, and this is our shorter Friday into the weeking 3 top stories of the week. There's a lot that happened this week, but I wanted to pick the 3 top ones that really everybody's kind of talking about, and how they can relate to the subject material that we cover in this particular field that we cover, the Seed War and what's going on in the world with rebellious angels and how they influence the society we are in. The 3 things I want to cover is of course, the DC plane crash. We're all talking about that, and the whole high-profile confirmation hearings this week. And number 3, we're also going to go over this mysterious help message in Los Angeles that has to deal with child trafficking, possibly. So let's jump right into it, because this is only going to be, roughly 15 minutes of your time. It's just a quick going over the top 3 headlines of the week and the takeaway for how our worldview, or at least my worldview, for this podcast, Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles, operates, because I look beyond just what we see in the news. I don't believe they, or really too many people, could be trusted. We need to look a little further and see what's really going on. And one of the key things that I look into when I think of these things is where Scripture talks about us not wrestling with flesh and blood, but rather powers, principalities. There's things moving and shaking behind the scenes here with all of this stuff, and they don't want you thinking about them. They want you thinking about the entertaining human hosts and things of that nature, and getting all caught up in it. So without further ado, let's not waste time and get right into it. So on January 29th this year, we had a tragic mid-air collision that occurred near Washington, D.C. I'm sure you already have heard about it. The latest news is all 67 individuals on board both aircraft. I've heard there were 3 on board the Black Hawk helicopter. Anyway, it was American Eagle Flight 5342, and like I just said, a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. On this passenger list, because here's the thing. I was reading through comments on this one and through some of my feeds, and I'm going to tell you, and I don't know what your first thought was when you heard the news on this, but I'm going to guess that if it wasn't your first thought, it was close. Because when I looked at the comment sections, if I didn't see it as the first comment, it was in there, and the question was, who was on the plane, right? So that's where we are, right? We've gotten to a point, and rightfully so. This is well deserved by our government and media and everybody associated with all the incredible lying they constantly do, and deception, and the things that they involve themselves in. So why do we have the skepticism? Well, we're always speculating about things of this nature, identities of the victims and potential undisclosed motives, because this just seems to happen all the time. I look back to one of the things I always think about when I think about this kind of operation is you look back to historical events like Operation Northwoods. It was back in about 1962 where they proposed a false flag operation by our U.S. Department of Defense to justify military intervention in Cuba. They were literally going, one of the ideas was to shoot down passenger aircraft with you folks on it. Living, breathing American people. They were just going to kill you to get us involved in a war. So don't think that, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but I mean, this is why people are asking who was on the plane, because it makes the first thing you're thinking is, okay, what three-letter agency or what corrupt officials or what deep state operation smashed that helicopter into the plane? That's what we're all thinking. Is there any evidence for it yet? No. Will we ever see evidence for it? I have no idea. But I imagine the most important question on that one is going to boil down to who was on that plane. And if there was somebody important on it and we discover it at some point, then you ain't going to be able to tell anybody that, you know, with this lack of trust in the government, that they weren't somehow involved with it. And so, you know, because we have, you know, a lack of detailed information on this one, it's going to fuel conspiracies for a while. You can count on it. And so let's go on to the political theater involved this week. I have found it amusing. Part of the reason I have this podcast name is Pilgrim's Gray is because I don't want to be a part of this whole good cop, bad cop, black and white checkerboard, Mason, deep state, two wings on the same corrupt bird thing. But I watch this political theater, and we've, of course, those of you who aren't familiar, or you haven't been paying attention, you don't watch TV, much probably to your blessing. We've had hearings this week that involved nominees, including Robert F. Kennedy for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tulsi Gabbard for the Director of National Intelligence, and Kash Patel for the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And of course, they're going to be contentious, and because of that, relatively entertaining. For those of you, you know, who enjoy good sparring, I guess. And, you know, because they're so highly publicized, the nature of these hearings just often resembles theatrical performances to me. It's some of the questions, and it's absurd. I really feel like sometimes we are watching a play and we're seeing good cop, bad cop play out, and we're all supposed to pick a side and shout for our team and be divided. And I can't think of a worst thing to do, and it plays right into the hands if that's what's really going on. All you're doing is playing into the hands by picking a side and then not listening to anything the other person has to say. We're Americans, and these people, in my opinion, are mostly a joke. And I don't know necessarily who's really running things other than the beings that were here before the flood and for some time after the flood, with their, I believe, their behavior being restrained around the time that God walked in the flesh on the earth through Jesus Christ. They've been restrained by him and his Holy Spirit living in us on this earth. But that doesn't mean these other rebels have gone away. They just look for ways to get around it. I believe the Tower of Babel really screwed them up, and they wanted their unity. They wanted one world government, even back at Babel, and wanted to make a name, for themselves. It's what they do. They want worship for themselves that really should only be due to God. And we've given it to them. I mean, look at all the gods we have. You know, gods of Eastern culture, Greek culture, Roman culture, Japanese culture. We all have our gods. Many of them are probably the same beings with different names. But what this really reminded me of is, imagining what the divine or infernal council, however you want to call it, but these rebellious angels meeting together to how they want to run things on this earth. And it kind of makes me wonder, maybe we get in our heads that because they're not, human, that they can't appear human. But it's pretty clear they can. I mean, the beings that appeared to Abraham look like humans. The ones that appear to Lot look like humans. The ones that freed Peter out of jail look like humans. they almost always look like humans, maybe slightly better versions of us, or whatever you want to call it. But they're you can't tell them apart from us. So it just makes me wonder if we're just watching theater, and they're that's my take on the hearings and this help message. That I find really strange, because again, just like with the first thing I brought up, the first thing in your head is, who's on the plane. Well, with this child trafficking thing, and if you don't know about it, it's where there were disturbing messages, including help, LAPD, and Trafico, and it was out in a debris area near a rail yard in Los Angeles. And of course, the first thing you think about is, because we've seen children trafficked in these rail cars and other things of that nature before, or in, shipping docks and what have you. It just makes you wonder, well, again, the first thing you think is this a message that's there or written into the sand or scrawled on signs for getting help from the LAPD? Because I can tell you my first thought, and the thought that I think a lot of people are having, is this is probably being put in messages on the ground for people from the air to see, to implicate the LAPD and our federal agencies in trafficking children in this rail yard. I mean, we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of missing children. And oftentimes those, especially the ones coming across the border, that have disappeared to the tune of some, I don't know, between 200,000 to 300,000 in the last 8 years or so. We have them in our custody, and we hand them over to people who we don't even know who in the world they are. This is some sort of madness. And for those of you who don't know, terrible things happen to these children. And I almost don't even want to go into what could possibly be going on. I know, probably some level of slavery would probably be the best case scenario for these poor kids. But we all know that it generally speaking involves, people who have an interest in perversion with this. But even worse than that, if you haven't heard of adrenochrome by now, you know that this is a perfect way for these monsters to acquire it. Nobody's going to, they're not going to take kids that, people will put on a manhunt for. Nobody's going to see these kids. Nobody's ever going to see them going into the rail cars. Nobody's going to see them coming across the border. They won't be missed, so they can do whatever they want to these kids, whether it's, their immoral perversions with, their physical lust, or all of it. I mean, why stop there? I mean, I'm sure that these people probably use them up, and when they're done with them, can use them for whatever they need, whether it's, extracting adrenochrome from terrifying them and torturing them, or whatever the case may be. These kids need prayer and help. And anyway, those are the three top of this particular week. Again, every week we will cover at 8 o'clock Friday night, Central Standard Time. You don't have to listen to it then. You can listen to it sometime over the weekend. But those are the top three stories. And if you want to share your opinion on it and what you think's going on, I'd love to know if that was your first thought, because I know it was my wife's thought, my thought, and most of the comments that I'm reading online on my X account at You Will Know. These are what we're thinking. Anyway, let's play you out with our wonderful song, and you guys have a awesome weekend.
The star falls. Its light swallowed by the earth's caress. Kingdom hand it turns, and stone gates grind. Breath of the unsealed rises, skies blacken with ash.